The tension in the alley was thick as five men loomed, their expressions twisted in irritation, their hair a motley mix of colors. They were clearly part of the same group, thugs who thrived in the shadows. Joe Hui's blood boiled at the sight. Without hesitation he charged forward. "Stop!" he shouted. The gang turned in unison, their attention snapping to him like predators spotting fresh prey. They circled him, forming a wall of hostility. "Where did this little brat come from?" one of them sneered, the very man who had been yanking at Song Kaien's bag. He strolled toward Joe Hui with a smirk. "Trying to play hero, huh? Listen, if you know what's good for you, you'll turn around and scram." Without waiting for a response, the thug shoved Joe Hui hard. Joe Hui stumbled, his balance wavering for a moment before he caught himself. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay calm. Fighting head-on wasn't an option, these men outnumbered him and the one in the lead looked especially dangerous. But if they were after money, that he had plenty of. "You want cash?" Joe Hui pulled out a thick stack of bills from his bag. "Then take mine, let her go." The thug's eyes gleamed with greed. Well, didn't expect such a big fish to walk right into our net." "Cut the crap," Joe Hui snapped, "take it and let her go." He threw the money straight at the man's face. The slap of cash against his skin made the thug's smirk vanish. Fury flared in his eyes as he lunged, grabbing Joe Hui's collar and cocking his fist back for a punch. But Joe Hui remained unshaken. Before the punch could land, he pulled out another stack of cash and held it up. The thug froze, his expression torn between anger and avarice. Then greed won. He lowered his fist, grinning. Smart choice, he reached for the money. At that moment, Joe Hui's gaze flickered toward Song Kaien. She caught his silent message and took the chance to slip away unnoticed. She had been frozen in fear until now, her mind struggling to process what was happening. But as she ran, her heart pounded with a different rhythm, not just fear but admiration. Though the man wore a mask, something about him, the way he moved, the way he acted, was striking. Still, worry not at her. She hesitated at the corner, then ducked into the shadows, phone in hand. Quickly, she reported the scene to the police, her eyes never leaving Joe Hui. Meanwhile, Joe Hui wasn't done. Instead of handing the cash over, he flung it at the thug's face a second time. The group roared in outrage, several of them lunged, ready to beat him down. Wait, Joe Hui shouted, raising his hands. "You want more, I'll give you everything." Men hesitated. Taking advantage of their momentary pause, Joe Hui yanked open his bag and threw out all the money he had. Bills fluttered through the air, raining down onto the group. As expected, greed overtook them. Their anger vanished as they scrambled to grab as much as they could. Joe Hui didn't waste a second. He turned, ready to make his escape. Then, ding! Congratulations to the host for completing this time-limited challenge. The host has obtained a skill lottery. Would you like to draw it now? Joe Hui's eyebrows lifted. Of course he had to. Yes. Congratulations! The host has obtained the beginner skill enhancement for Transcendent Martial Master and has leveled up to Wealth Master. Keep up the good work. Power surged through him. Joe Hui grinned. Moments ago he was just an ordinary man, outnumbered and outmatched. Now he was something else entirely. His footsteps slowed, he turned back. The gang was still too busy grabbing money to notice him at first. "Brother Wei, this is a jackpot," one of them laughed. "We're rich." "Yeah, we gotta celebrate. Last time I got kicked out of Spring Fragrance Massage, but this time." His words died as he followed his friend's gaze. Joe Hui was walking toward them. Something about him was different. His arms folded across his chest, his neck tilted slightly. A sharp, crisp crack echoed through the alley as he stretched. Liu Wei, the leader, felt a sudden chill. This wasn't the same man who had been desperate moments ago. The energy around him had changed, more dangerous, more commanding. Liu Wei's breath hitched. "You, what are you doing?" He yanked one of his men in front of him like a human shield. Joe Hui didn't stop. Slow, amused smile spread across his lips. The thug in front of Liu Wei lunged, only to be effortlessly lifted and tossed aside like a rag doll. The rest of the gang snapped out of their daze. They rushed at him. But Joe Hui was untouchable. He grabbed the first attacker's arm, twisted, and slammed him onto the ground with a powerful shoulder throw. Another charged. Joe Hui intercepted him mid-motion, planting a foot into his stomach and sending him flying into two others. Brutal elbow strike dropped another man instantly. In seconds, the alley was littered with groaning bodies. Only Liu Wei remained. He was shaking. You stay back, I'll call the police." Joe Hui chuckled. "You a street thug calling the cops." Right on cue, the wail of sirens filled the air. "Nobody move, police." Joe Hui took a step back as officers flooded the alley. Song Kaiyan emerged from her hiding spot, rushing forward to explain the situation. The police moved quickly, rounding up the battered criminals. Zhou Hui, still masked, gave his statement before turning to leave. But as he stepped outside, Song Kaiyan was there waiting. "Thank you," she stammered, "thank you so much for today." Her eyes lingered on him, admiration clear in her gaze. The way he stood, the quiet confidence in his posture, it was mesmerizing. Zhou Hui simply gave a curt nod. Then he turned to walk away. "Wait," Song Kaiyan called after him, Can I treat you to a meal?" He hesitated. For a moment, it seemed as if he might turn back. But then, without a word, he disappeared into the night. Song Kaiyan stood there, watching his retreating figure, heart pounding. Though she had never seen his face, she was captivated. And deep inside she knew she would see him again. Zhou Hui returned to the shabby rented room, the weight of the day settling on his shoulders. After a brief moment of rest, he opened the map, his eyes scanning for the next spot to pick up the money. It was only a short distance away, but the urgency of his situation lingered. Suddenly his phone rang, breaking the silence. The caller ID displayed the hospital's name. "Hello, Mr. Zhou Hui, this is the hospital. Your father Zhou Ming's condition has worsened and he's currently in the process of being resuscitated." Zhou Hui's heart tightened as he heard the news. His father, suffering from a cerebral infarction, had been in and out of the hospital for years, but they were struggling. His father's medical bills had always been a burden. They relied solely on Song Kaiyan's salary to cover the costs. Zhou Hui's mind quickly turned to Liu Zhu. The betrayal stung once again. She had climbed to a higher position and discarded him without a second thought. Despite his revenge, it all felt meaningless compared to the long years he had spent trying to make a better life. His voice came out hoarse when he spoke into the phone. "Understood, I'll pay the fees immediately, and please transfer my father to the best ward." The voice on the other end hesitated for a moment. "But with your current situation." "Don't worry," Zhou Hui cut them off and ended the call. His mind was already consumed with the need to save his father. He opened the navigation system in his mind and followed it, his steps quickening. The path led him to an old locust tree where he stopped. His fingers brushed along the tree's rough bark until he found the bank card hidden inside a hole in the trunk. As the system's prompt echoed in his mind, "Host, please spend the 2 million on this card before tomorrow afternoon. Failure to do so will result in a 50% deduction from your lifespan." Zhou Hui's eyes hardened. He had to get to the hospital to save his father. With the money in his hand, he hailed a taxi, desperate to reach the hospital as quickly as possible. But fate had other plans. The road was blocked. "Master, I'm heading to the hospital. Please find another way," Zhou Hui urged as he glanced anxiously at the 2 lines of traffic stretching ahead. The driver wiped the sweat from his forehead. "It'll be at least another hour or 2 before we move." But then, the unexpected happened. A gap opened in the traffic. The driver saw his chance and decided to take it, maneuvering the taxi to change lanes, but just as he did, an Audi ahead of them turned as well. The collision was small, but enough to cause the paint to scratch. Zhou Hui frowned but held his tongue, knowing the driver had acted out of desperation. But then, a man with dyed yellow hair exited the Audi. He stormed over, inspecting the damage before grabbing the driver by the collar. "You're paying for this?" the man shouted angrily. "Do you have any idea how much this car costs? 350,000 yuan. You probably can't even afford a meal, let alone the repairs." The driver, panicked, tried to explain. "I didn't mean to, I was just trying to get around. You turned out of nowhere." But the yellow-haired man wasn't listening. "You want to walk away from this? No chance. You're paying me 180,000 yuan today or you'll regret it." Zhou Hui's patience wore thin. He watched the scene unfold, his gaze hardening. This wasn't just about a fender bender, it was a scam. "You're clearly trying to rip him off," Zhou Hui spoke up from the back of the car, his calm voice cutting through the argument. The driver, desperate, looked to Zhou Hui for help. "Young man, can you help? Let's just figure out who's at fault here." Zhou Hui stepped out of the car, his presence imposing. The yellow-haired man sneered, pulling out a wrench and pointing it threateningly. "One word, pay up or I'll call a few friends over to deal with you." Zhou Hui's expression remained cold. He approached the man with deliberate steps, grabbing the wrench from his hand. With a flick of his wrist, the man found himself unable to hold on. "What do you think you're doing?" the yellow-haired man growled, his face flushed with anger. Zhou Hui smiled darkly. "What did you say just now?" The man stammered, clearly unnerved. I didn't mean." Last sentence, Zhou Hui's voice was like ice. Compensation, the man muttered, sweating under Zhou Hui's cold gaze. Zhou Hui nodded, satisfied with the answer. He then walked over to the man's Audi, casually patting the car's shiny surface. 350,000 huh, he mused aloud, I'll pay you back. The yellow-haired man's eyes widened in disbelief. What, are you serious? I just bought it. Without another word, Joe Hui turned and walked towards a nearby bank. He pulled out his card, withdrawing the required amount of money without hesitation. The man, who had been so confident moments ago, now watched in stunned silence as Joe Hui counted out 35 stacks of red bills, tossing them at his feet. Here's your money, Joe Hui said nonchalantly, as if the sum was no trouble at all. The driver stood frozen, unsure of what to make of the situation. Was this a joke? Joe Hui glanced at him and said, Don't worry, I know exactly what I'm doing. He turned to leave, the weight of his father's situation pressing on him once again. The man could hardly believe his eyes. The pile of money in his hands felt surreal. He held it tightly, his excitement growing. You didn't lie to me? This is really for me. His voice wavered with disbelief as he looked at Joe Hui, unable to fathom the reality of the situation. Joe Hui smiled calmly, causing the man to shiver, his excitement turning into unease. Don't worry, of course it's for you, Joe Hui assured him, his smile almost too calm, sending a chill down the man's spine. The driver, watching from the side, couldn't help but feel envy. How many trips would it take to earn that kind of money? His thoughts swirled with disbelief. Bystanders nearby were equally dumbfounded. Is this guy really that big of an idiot? One of them muttered. Yeah, I don't get it, the paint job wasn't even that bad, another person added. I wish that was me, even if my car got wrecked I'd be happy with that much money, someone else joked. Joe Hui overheard their comments but didn't respond. Instead, he simply walked toward the man who was clutching the money even tighter, now filled with anxiety. Don't come closer, you promised, you must pay me, you can't go back on your word. The man's voice was filled with panic as he held the money protectively. Joe Hui stepped forward without hesitation and, in one smooth motion, took the large wrench from the man's hand. The man's eyes widened in confusion and anger. What are you doing? But Joe Hui didn't answer. He walked up to the front of the man's beloved Audi, took a deep breath and swung the wrench down onto the windshield. A thick, jagged line appeared, slicing across the glass. Joe Hui didn't stop there. He swung again, this time shattering the windshield completely. The glass splintered but didn't fall, leaving a mess of streaks and cracks across the car. Without missing a beat, he turned and smashed the hood with another blow, caving it in. The man's heart dropped. His beloved car, his pride and joy, was being destroyed right in front of him. Stop, what are you doing? He screamed, rushing forward to stop Joe Hui. Joe Hui, however, wasn't interested in stopping. He shoved the man aside with ease. I've already paid for your car, what happens to it now is none of your business. Joe Hui then turned to the driver. Master, I'll give you 50,000 yuan, help me destroy this car. The driver stood frozen, the amount of money almost overwhelming. He had to run for almost a year to earn that much, yet here it was, handed to him in an instant. After swallowing his nerves, the driver nodded. All right, I'll do it. The driver took the wrench and climbed onto the Audi's roof, bringing the tool down with a loud clang. Each blow made dents appear all over the car's body, ruining it beyond recognition. The bystanders watched in disbelief. The car that had once gleamed with pride was now a hunk of twisted metal. They could only shake their heads in regret at the sight. But then, another man, apparently from the crowd, approached with a grin. Hey, handsome brother, do you want me to smash the car too? I used to be a car mechanic, I'm really good at this stuff. Joe Hui raised an eyebrow, finding the offer amusing, but seeing how hard the driver was working, he decided to let the man join in. Sure, you can join in, master, we'll split the 50,000 with him for 20,000 yuan. The crowd gasped, some muttering to themselves about their missed opportunity. The new mechanic jumped onto the car, hammering away at the roof with enthusiasm. Now there were two people smashing the Audi to pieces. The original owner, watching helplessly, clenched his fists. His eyes were filled with frustration and pain as he saw his beloved car being destroyed. He could do nothing but stand by, powerless to stop it. Time passed and the car's destruction continued. Joe Hui, satisfied with the damage, glanced at his watch. It was nearly noon and he still had to get to the hospital. He walked away, leaving the scene behind, and soon, a new car appeared to take him to his next destination. The passers-by continued to whisper, full of envy and confusion. Who is this guy? He just threw away 400,000 yuan like it was nothing, but he looks so ordinary aside from being a bit more handsome than most. Seriously, this is infuriating. If I had that money I could never just throw it away like that, but to him, it's just another day. Zhou Hui had once again become the center of attention, the talk of the town. Arriving at the hospital, Zhou Hui rushed to the ward, a bag of fruit in hand. He had worked so hard in the past to try and cure his father's illness, but even with all his efforts, his father had only been able to stay in an ordinary, overcrowded ward. As he entered the ward, the air was thick with unpleasant smells, the sounds of 6 different patients filling the space. It was a far cry from what Zhou Hui had imagined for his father. Next to one of the beds, Auntie Chun, the daughter-in-law of another patient, was busy with chores. When she saw Zhou Hui, she greeted him warmly. "Little Hui, you're here, it's been a while, huh? Your dad's probably ready to give up at this point." Zhou Hui nodded quietly and moved past her, glancing around at the makeshift beds around the room. The sight made his stomach turn, the memory of a dinner he'd had a while ago flashing in his mind. His father, who had been through so much, was now stuck in this grim place. It pained him deeply. As he reached his father's bed, he saw his mother asleep beside him. Her hair, now half white, was a stark reminder of the years of stress and worry. His heart ached at the sight of her, her face etched with worry, her voice hoarse from lack of rest. Zhou Hui gently placed a blanket over her, his eyes wet with emotion. She stirred and looked up, her expression weary. "Little Hui, why are you here? You've been working so hard." Zhou Hui fought back his tears. "Mom, let me see Dad." He felt a pang of guilt. When he had the means to help, he hadn't done enough. He hadn't been there when his father needed him most. His mother's voice was filled with pain. "You're doing so much, but you never come here. Why don't you take a break when you can?" Zhou Hui's heart broke even more. He had been so focused on his work and his rise in wealth that he had neglected his family. "Don't worry, Mom, we're not struggling anymore. I've landed a big project recently and I got a large bonus. We'll be able to afford the best treatment for Dad now." His mother blinked, stunned by the news. "Really, you're not joking?" Zhou Hui nodded, trying to hold back his emotions. "Don't worry, I'll arrange a private room for Dad." But his mother stopped him. No, this ward is fine. You've worked so hard, don't waste your money on something like that." Her words struck him to the core. Despite everything she had endured, she still didn't want to burden him further. Zhou Hui swallowed hard. "Don't worry, Mom, I'll make sure everything is taken care of." Zhou Hui's heart sank as he listened to Liu Zhu's words, feeling an overwhelming bitterness he couldn't quite shake. He struggled to find a response, unsure how to express the turmoil inside him. Suddenly, the sound of a loud, brash woman's voice rang out from outside the door. "Hey, let me ask, is Zhou Ming in this ward?" "Yeah, you're looking for Zhou Ming. Who are you?" Auntie Chun responded, her voice tinged with curiosity. "I'm his brother's wife," came the sharp reply. "Oh," Auntie Chun nodded, "then you can go in, the bed in the back is it." Zhou Hui didn't need to look, he already knew who it was. It had to be his wife, Wang Taohua. However, when Sun Ziyume overheard the conversation, her expression immediately shifted. A look of unease washed over her face and she quickly turned to Zhou Hui, her voice anxious. "Little Hui, it's noon, go buy me some food, I'm hungry." Zhou Hui instantly understood her unease. Wang Taohua's presence always meant trouble and Sun Ziyume wanted to get rid of her quickly. Zhou Hui gently held her hand. "Mom, don't worry." Just then the door creaked open and in walked a middle-aged woman with dark skin, dressed in a pink short-sleeved shirt and black pants, her hair tied up in a messy bun. The woman's eyes gleamed as she saw Zhou Hui and Sun Ziyume. "Sister-in-law Ziyume, you made it easy for me to find you. Say, why didn't you tell me the address clearly? It's better I asked Da Kui from the village first." Da Kui was Sun Ziyume's closest friend and often they would chat together over tea. Wang Taohua's voice was as loud as ever as she entered the room with a plastic bag that barely contained a few cucumbers, tomatoes, and some wild peaches. It looked like a mockery. "Yeah, little Hui is also here. Look, I don't even know what I'm buying. I brought over some fruits and vegetables thinking my big brother loves cucumbers," Wang Taohua said with a grin. Sun Ziyume responded curtly, "Okay," her indifference clear as day. Wang Taohua, undeterred, squatted down to place the bag on the bedside table. But when she opened it, her eyes widened at the sight of the neatly packaged fruits within. "Yo, sister-in-law, what is this? I've never seen this before. Let me taste it for you," she exclaimed, grabbing a large mango from the bag. Zhou Hui couldn't help but roll his eyes. He already knew why Sun Ziyume kept her distance from Wang Taohua. The woman had long taken advantage of their family, never offering a penny when Zhou Ming fell ill. Now she was here to extract even more. Wang Taohua hesitated with the mango, licking her lips before turning to Zhou Hui. "Little Hui, how do you eat this thing?" Zhou Hui barely looked at her and coldly responded, "Eat with your mouth." Wang Taohua scowled, clearly unamused. Look at what you're saying, child, she muttered under her breath, then bit into the mango, her face contorted in disgust. Aya, why is this so astringent? What is this thing? Forget it, I'll just take it home for second uncle to eat. Zhou Hui's anger flared, but he remained silent. Sun Ziyumei's face darkened as she watched Wang Taohua stuff the mango into her pocket. Wang Taohua, oblivious to the tension, smiled wide. I just came to see my big brother. Sun Ziyumei, irritated beyond measure, replied, then you've seen him, now leave. Sister-in-law, don't be like this. Back then it was also because our family was poor. Otherwise, why wouldn't my blood brother lend you money for the doctor? We were still family then. Wang Taohua's tone dripped with feigned sympathy. Sun Ziyumei's heart softened slightly at the mention of the past, but she quickly hardened. What exactly are you here for? Instead of answering directly, Wang Taohua sidled up to Zhou Hui. Yo, this child's clothes are really not bad. Looks like little Hui earns a lot in the city. Otherwise, why would he dress so well? Zhou Hui and Sun Ziyumei exchanged confused glances, unable to understand her intention. What are you trying to say? Zhou Hui asked, irritated. Wang Taohua sat down on the bed next to Sun Ziyumei, uninvited. Sister-in-law, our Daju has taken a fancy to a girl from the neighboring village. I was thinking about letting them get married. Sun Ziyumei's expression softened for a moment. That's a good thing. But Wang Taohua's tone shifted to one of concern. The girl wants 50,000 yuan for the betrothal gift. We don't have that money and we don't have a house in the city either. Zhou Hui understood immediately. This was why Wang Taohua had shown up. Sun Ziyumei's face tightened. Peach Blossom, we don't have any money, your brother is sick. Wang Taohua, however, was not deterred. I've already asked about it. Big brother's illness can't be cured, so why not lend me money for his treatment and I'll let Daju marry first. Zhou Hui's blood boiled, but Sun Ziyumei, sensing the growing tension, held his hand, trying to calm him. Wang Taohua, seeing Sun Ziyumei's hesitation, gathered her courage and continued. Since Zhou Hui works in the city and earns 10,000 yuan a month, I thought maybe he could help. Zhu Zhu and his wife could stay at your place for now. Zhou Hui was seething with anger. Aunt, you don't need to worry about this. I will take care of my mother and my father will get better. His voice was cold, firm. Sun Ziyumei was equally furious, her anger spilling over. You've calculated everything so well. To drain us dry, you're even willing to sacrifice your own brother's life. With that, Sun Ziyumei physically shoved Wang Taohua toward the door. The onlookers, unsure whether to intervene, slowly dispersed, knowing better than to get involved in family matters. With one last angry shout from Wang Taohua, the doctor intervened and she left in a huff. As the door closed, Sun Ziyumei sat down heavily by the bed, tears welling up in her eyes. Zhou Hui, his heart heavy, went over to comfort her. He had made a promise to himself, no matter what he would make sure his parents lived a good life from now on. Sun Ziyumei wiped her tears away, looking up at Zhou Hui. Little Hui, your aunt won't let this go easily, we still owe her money. Zhou Hui stood there for a moment, holding the bank card in his hand, his eyes unwavering as he spoke calmly. Mom, don't worry. There's several 100,000 in this card. It's my bonus and commission from a while ago. The words hung in the air and Sun Ziyumei froze, her hands shaking slightly as she took the card from him. She couldn't believe it, so much money, more than she could have imagined. Her breath caught in her chest, her eyes welling up with tears. Little Hui, is what you're saying true? Her voice was a mix of disbelief and overwhelming joy, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Zhou Hui nodded firmly, his voice steady. Amen. Sun Ziyumei sighed deeply, her voice soft and filled with regret. Sigh, I have truly wronged you, working so hard every day. Zhou Hui glanced at her, a small smile on his face. Don't worry, Mom, our good days are coming. Sun Ziyumei nodded, the burden of years of hardship seeming to lift slightly off her shoulders. Mom, I'll apply for a better ward for Dad, Zhou Hui said, his concern for his father clear. He looked around at the current ward. It wasn't that it wasn't adequate, but the noisy environment wasn't ideal for his father's recovery. Sun Ziyumei hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice soft but insistent. Forget it, little Hui, there's nothing bad about living here, let's save some money. Zhou Hui understood her concern, but he was determined to make sure his father received the best care possible. He made his way to the reception desk. Hello, nurse, I'm the family member of the patient in Ward 106. I'd like to apply for a private ward. As he spoke, a doctor with large ears and a bulbous head walked past and overheard their conversation. The doctor stopped, glancing at Zhou Hui with a look of disdain. Ward 106, that's Zhou Ming's room? Zhou Hui nodded, his face tight with frustration. Yes, that's right, I'm his son. The doctor scoffed, eyeing Joe Hui from head to toe. Forget it, do you know how much a single room costs per day? I'm aware of your family's situation. Joe Hui's anger flared. He had expected some resistance, but this doctor's dismissive attitude was too much. He felt his blood boil as he fought to keep his composure. Ignoring the doctor, he turned to the nurse. What's the cost of a private ward? The nurse looked at her screen. The cheapest is 5,800, the average is 8,800, and the most expensive is the luxurious ward, which includes daily checkups. Joe Hui's heart sank at the price. It was high, but for his father it was worth it. He clenched his jaw and spoke with determination. I'll take the luxurious ward. The nurse blinked in surprise. People who could afford luxurious wards were typically either wealthy officials or those with reimbursements, not someone like Joe Hui. She didn't say anything but stared at him, unsure. The doctor, seeing this, sneered. Kid, don't bite off more than you can chew. How long do you think you can afford that kind of room? A day, 2 days? Joe Hui's anger was close to boiling over, but he stayed silent. He needed to take care of his father, not get into a confrontation with this doctor. At that moment, the nurse cleared her throat. Sir, the patient Zhou Ming has an outstanding bill of 10,200 yuan in medical fees. How do you intend to pay for that? Joe Hui's stomach churned. It was true, the money he had paid earlier had been exhausted. The doctor laughed, seeing an opportunity to humiliate him further. Haha, look at this, you can't even pay the medical fees and you think you can afford the best room. It's a miracle we haven't kicked you out already. Joe Hui could no longer hold back. With a swift motion, he grabbed the doctor's wrist and twisted it, his anger making him strong in the moment. The doctor yelped in pain, but just as the situation escalated, a woman in a white coat hurried over. It was the hospital dean, Zhang Yanfeng, alerted by the commotion. What's going on, young man? If you have something to say it calmly, she said, approaching with concern. Joe Hui took a step back, releasing the doctor's wrist. He sized up the woman, his frustration evident but controlled. You must be the principal? Zhang Yanfeng nodded, looking him up and down. Yes, what's the issue? Joe Hui's voice was sharp but measured. I came to apply for the luxurious ward, but your doctor mocked me for it. Is that your hospital's rule? Zhang Yanfeng looked at Joe Hui, sizing him up. Normally, she wouldn't take someone like him seriously, but when she heard about the luxurious ward, her interest piqued. If he could afford that for a month, it would be a significant boost for the hospital's financials. Before she could respond, the doctor spoke again, his voice dripping with disdain. Principal, don't believe him. How can someone who can't even pay his medical fees afford such a ward? He's just a liar. Joe Hui remained calm as he reached into his pocket, pulling out the bank card. Help me charge 500,000 yuan for medical fees and arrange for the luxurious ward for 2 months. Zhang Yanfeng froze in place. 500,000 yuan, the number seemed almost unreal. She looked at the nurse, who nodded with an expression of disbelief. Just as Liu Zipeng, the doctor, tried to scoff again, a voice echoed in the room. Ding, 150,000 yuan transferred. Liu Zipeng's face drained of color, his smug expression gone. Zhang Yanfeng was shocked as the realization hit her. This young man had just transferred a large sum of money right in front of them. Liu Zipeng tried to save face, but Zhang Yanfeng wasn't having it. She turned to him, her voice cold. Dr. Liu, where do you think you're going? Zhou Hui stood silently by, watching the unfolding drama with an unreadable expression. Zhang Yanfeng's voice was firm as she addressed Liu Zipeng. Your behavior is unacceptable. From today onwards you are suspended from your duties. Liu Zipeng's face turned white and he quickly pleaded for forgiveness, but it was too late. Zhang Yanfeng was already turning her attention to Zhou Hui. I doubt your ability to work. From today onwards you will be suspended from your duties. Zhang Yanfeng's words rang out like a final judgment. The room fell silent, the weight of her decision settling on everyone. Liu Zipeng, humiliated and defeated, ran off, only to be stopped by the principal. Mr. Zhou, I was wrong. I couldn't recognize you before. Please forgive me, he said, bowing his head in apology. Zhou Hui stood there, seething with anger as Liu Zipeng tried to save face with his insincere words. The doctor's attempts at belittling him only fueled the fire within him, but Zhou Hui remained calm, determined to show that things had changed. As Zhou Hui thought about the past, the contrast between then and now hit him hard. He used to struggle just to pay for his father's medical fees, living paycheck to paycheck, but now he had the means to give his parents the best of everything. He wanted to show them the fruits of his hard work and success. Just then the sound of movement came from the sickroom and Sun Xiumei appeared in the hallway. The moment she laid eyes on the scene, her gaze fell on Liu Zipeng clinging to Zhou Hui's leg and her suspicions grew. Before she could ask anything, Zhang Yanfeng, the hospital dean, quickly approached her and praised her son. "You must be Mr. Zhou's mother, your son is truly amazing," Zhang Yanfeng said with enthusiasm. Sun Ziyume beamed with pride, but her joy faded slightly when she saw the doctor still clinging to her son. Before Liu Zipeng could reach her, Zhou Hui saw through his intentions and grabbed him. "Mom, don't worry, I'm just handling some things with the principal. You go back to the ward," Zhou Hui said reassuringly. Sun Ziyume nodded, still unsure but trusting her son's words. She returned to the room and Zhou Hui turned to the dean. "Principal Zhang, I don't want to see him again, you know what I mean," Zhou Hui said, his voice cold and firm. Zhang Yanfeng, having no choice, nodded and addressed Liu Zipeng sternly. "Okay, Mr. Zhou, don't worry, I will make sure you are satisfied." Liu Zipeng, get lost. Liu Zipeng, humiliated, was dragged away by the principal and Zhou Hui's anger slowly subsided. The nurse who had been present, having witnessed everything, stood stunned. She had never imagined Zhou Hui's request for a luxury ward was genuine. She had laughed at him earlier, only to now find herself in the presence of someone with immense financial power. Zhou Hui, unfazed, turned to the nurse. "When can we move to the luxury ward?" The nurse, still processing the situation, checked the system and replied, "It will be ready by this afternoon. The room needs cleaning." "That's fine," Zhou Hui said, then turned to Sun Ziyume. "Mom, you must be hungry, I'll go buy you something to eat." Sun Ziyume nodded, still in awe of her son's confidence and newfound wealth. Zhou Hui took out his phone and made a call. "Hello, Manager Li." Manager Li's voice was filled with excitement when he answered. "Mr. Zhou, what a pleasant surprise. Do you want to come over for dinner? I've been saving your seat." "No, I need you to send some food to room 106, inpatient department, Shanghai Hospital," Zhou Hui instructed. "Of course, I'll be there in no time," Manager Li replied eagerly. Within half an hour, Manager Li arrived at the hospital, pushing a small cart with a lid covering the food. The moment he opened it, dry ice billowed from the dish, revealing a perfectly cooked steak, seafood and abalone, all arranged atop a block of ice. Sun Ziyume's eyes widened in shock as she stared at the extravagant meal. "How much does this cost?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Zhou Hui winked and reassured her, "Don't worry, it's not expensive." Manager Li quickly added, "Madam, your son helped me out a lot before, this meal is on me." Sun Ziyume's pride swelled even more as she realized her son had taken care of everything. This was the first time she'd experienced such fine dining, and she marveled at the food in front of her. Just then, the family from the nearby bed entered and Sun Ziyume frowned at the sight of Liu Jing, who had a knack for causing trouble. Liu Jing's eyes widened in envy as she saw the foreign chef cooking for Zhou Hui and his mother. Liu Jing's jealousy bubbled over. "What is this, the end of my days? Yesterday I was eating dry steamed buns and today you're feasting like royalty," she sneered. Sun Ziyume snapped back, "We have what we deserve. My son is capable, unlike some people who can't even afford their own medical bills." Liu Jing shot back, "Well, if you're so capable, why don't you go live in a luxury ward? Don't act like a big shot in a place like this." Before Zhou Hui could respond, Principal Zhang entered with several nurses and doctors in tow. "Mr. Zhou, the luxury ward is ready. We've already arranged everything for you," Zhang Yanfeng said, bowing respectfully. Zhou Hui nodded and the hospital staff began moving his things to the new room. Liu Jing, standing by, couldn't believe her eyes. The reality of Zhou Hui's newfound status was more than she could comprehend. As they moved out, Liu Jing's earlier mocking words hung in the air, but no one took her seriously. All eyes were on Zhou Hui, the man who had turned the hospital's fortunes around with just a swipe of his card. Liu Jing stood there stunned as the luxury ward staff moved away. The weight of her jealousy sank in as she realized the power that Zhou Hui now wielded, power she could never have imagined.